Hi, it's Annette Ba'u, and welcome to the Millionaire Insider. For over 30 years, I've been advising and researching the top 1% and 2% of millionaires to determine what millionaires with amazing lives do differently in their business, with their life, and their money. And I'm here to share it with you so that you can apply the material and ultimately create a financially free life you love. Now, I can't guarantee results, but what I can guarantee is that if you apply the material I share with you, you're going to dramatically increase your odds of success. Today's training is brought to you by Mindset Mastery. You can go to millionaireseries.com/mindset. If you want to succeed in your business, in your life, or with your money, it starts with your mindset. In fact, if I would have known that 30, 40 years ago, I can't even imagine where I'd be today. It is so critical. It's virtually impossible to achieve your goals if you don't master your mindset. So again, millionaireseries.com/mindset. You can go to millionaireseries.com/104 for all the show notes, or millionaireseries.com/MI for all of the episodes. Please hit subscribe so you get updates on new episodes. So today I'm diving into an interview I did several years ago with Dina Fliss. She's amazing. And it was for a series I did, Defining Millionaire Moments, how one choice can change your life forever. I was so fascinated to determine, what do people with amazing lives do differently? And to really do some research on it to find out information that's beyond the clients I was advising. So I knew what was reality in that front, but I wanted to see what was reality in other fronts and then see where the two merged. And so I really hope you enjoyed this interview as much as I did. I consider Dina a friend, a mentor, a peer. She is amazing. Now, before we dive in, you've got to agree that you're going to consult with your own team of advisors and review your situation before applying this material, and that this material is not intended to replace investment, financial planning, estate planning, or any other advice. You've got to look at your unique situation and get help and get advice where you need it. So let's dive in. So welcome, Dina. She is the owner of Global View Financial. She comes referred to me by one of my friends, Marty Rising, and it's such a pleasure to have you with us today, Dina.
Well, thank you, Annette. I'm glad to be here.
So before the interview, we're talking about motivation, and Marty speaks so highly of you, and I'm so excited to interview you. But we started talking a little bit about people's beliefs and behaviors. Do you want to expand a little bit on that and how it helped you get from where you were to where you are today?
Yeah, we were just speaking about how one of the most important key ingredients to becoming successful is to understand that really where the investment lies is within yourself, and that means understanding who you are, what your beliefs are, maybe even where those beliefs came from based on your past and all that kind of stuff, and then having a dream and having a vision and a goal and something that you're really shooting for. It's an ongoing process of learning. I mean, one of the greatest things I think that I ever learned when I was in school, I had a teacher that taught me a very important lesson, and that lesson was that you don't have to be in a classroom to learn. And if you learn how to learn, you can achieve anything in your life. And I really paid attention to that. And so today I am very well read, and I continue to read and invest time and effort into understanding global issues, local issues, investment trends, demographic trends. I mean, pretty much whatever it is out there that is affecting the planet is something that I take a keen interest in. In fact, back in 1996, I was a part of a Washington, D.C. task force on redefining retirement, the baby boomer challenge. And it started out where there was 300 of us that came from both the private and the public sector into Washington, D.C. on this project. It was through the Department of, well, it was actually through the Administration of Aging, which is a sub-department. What I was privy to from 1996, and I served on that task force for 6 years during the 8 years that President Clinton was president. And that's not a political statement on my part. Actually, I'm a very apolitical person. And the least that I can talk about politics and the least amount of government that we have, I think, I believe much like our founding fathers, which is limited government and allow people to govern themselves with correct principles and all that other kind of stuff. But when I was up there, I had an opportunity for those 6 years to see the demographic trends. And the stuff that we're now seeing today play out in the marketplace is stuff that we saw coming way back in 1996. And I'm talking about stuff from the Social Security Administration. I had a chance to work with those people. I had a chance to work with people from Medicare, Medicaid. I had a chance to work with a pretty good variety of people during that period of time. And I have to tell you that it was during that period of time was when I saw the university studies and the government studies of where the United States was, but most importantly where it was going. I had a very, very deep commitment to want to come back to my local office and apply the principle of thinking globally but acting locally. And that was sort of where I started. Even though I got in the financial industry in 1983, where I really began to take sort of a statesman view of making change was during that 6 years that I was part-time going back and forth between Milwaukee, Wisconsin, which is where I live, in Washington, D.C. Here I am today, still speaking about all of those trends and hopefully looking at where the mega trends are going into the future, and then understanding that the world is changing and it's changing fast. We're always in school. We're always having to reach out and think in new ways and to develop new systems of, everything that we're doing so that what we can do is stay on the leading edge of where those trends are going.
So true. Now let's go back for a minute and discuss some key moments in your upbringing. You had a teacher you shared that taught you how to learn, not just in the classroom, but to continue learning throughout your life. And you shared some of the key points that got you from where you were to where you are today. Can you share those with the audience?
Well, sure. I think there were two key turning points for me that I can speak about pretty passionately. One is that when I was 4 years old, I lost my father, and my mother was alone. She was by herself. I was the oldest of 3 kids, and I was 4 at the time, and I had a brother that was 3 and another brother that was 2 behind him. And my very first memory, and this was actually a guided meditation that I had been taken through by someone who was another woman who was in the financial industry that helped other women to understand their belief systems. So, I really appreciate the work that you're doing, Annette, because that's a very, very big part of it. And through that guided meditation, I was asked to go back to my earliest memory of money. The memory that I had was, it was shortly after my father was gone. My mom was in the kitchen with my grandparents, which are her parents, and I'll never forget, I was in the living room and I was looking through the dining room into the kitchen, and my mother was breaking down, and she was crying and she was weeping, and she was saying, "What am I going to do, and how am I going to take care of these kids? I don't have any money." And my mother didn't have any more than a high school education. She was a stay-at-home mom, like so many women were in the late 50s and 60s, and she didn't have a methodology and the ability to go out there and to earn an income. And my grandparents couldn't really help, but I just remember that day I knew that something fundamental had changed in my life, and I didn't really understand what it was. And what it ultimately played out into is over the next couple of years, we had a lot of financial difficulties. We lost the house. We really didn't have the financial security. And my mother, as the result of not being able to care for 3 kids, went on welfare. She became an alcoholic. She just didn't have the strength to be able to handle the 3 kids during that period of time. And so as I was growing up, I sort of took on the role of being a mom to my 2 older brothers and trying to support the family emotionally inside that family. And when I was going through the breakthroughs of understanding money, I realized that my success was being limited to a scarcity mentality. And unless I broke through that scarcity mentality and started understanding an abundance mentality and what all that meant and shifting those belief systems, but most important, being aware of how those belief systems were created, because they were created emotionally when I was a child. It wasn't something that was there conscious. Right. It was an unconscious belief system that was created. And so when I broke through that understanding, that was one of my first major breakthroughs. That's when my income started rising. I started moving from just making maybe 150,000 a year to, 250 and then, 350 and 500,000. And when I started getting in that $500,000 to $750,000 range, then something else happened in my life, and that was in 1996, right around the same time that I was working on the task force in Washington, D.C. And I have to say that at that time I was going through what I would define almost as a midlife career crisis, in that I loved the financial service industry, but what I saw coming was a train wreck, and my frustration in 1996, especially in that first year working in Washington, is I recognized immediately there was zero political will from the top down to implement the changes that were necessary to keep the train from wrecking. And so I realized that, and that was another belief system, is that I believe that the government could be the answer to everything if you got the right people in there. And I realized that there were really good people in there, but the system was not set up to deliver what we thought it was, and that the most effective change that I could ever make would be to just come back home and go to work in the private sector. And then in that same year, I got viral meningitis, and I got very, very sick and could not work for a period of about 4 months. And during that 4-month period of time was when I went through what I would define as a spiritual breakthrough. And that breakthrough was when I began to understand, not just understand, it was more profound than that. I actually experienced at a spiritual level that we are all one. That we are all one. That we are not separate from each other. We may look separate, and we may act like we're separate from each other, but in reality, we are all one. And in understanding that sort of unity consciousness, I began to have breakthroughs in my life in 1996 like I had never seen before. And that was taking me, now that I look back on it, to a totally different level of consciousness and growth. And that was when I started breaking through and making the 7-figure incomes and beyond. And then how I could go out and I actually had the power to affect change, because I recognize that that power is something that we all have inside of ourselves. But for whatever reason, whether it was how we were brought up or what our belief systems are, is that somehow we don't have that self-worth and that self-belief that we can go out and affect those changes. But in reality, we do. And it's just waking up to that and recognizing not only can we do it, but now what are the God-given talents that we have, and let's get about using them. And let's start finding some other people who want to do the same thing.
That's so true. A lot of people live in the scarcity mentality. I was just watching a TV clip, and they were saying 70% of all Americans live paycheck to paycheck. And I think that number's going up. It's scary, especially in uncertain times. Can you walk me through some of the steps to go from a scarcity mentality to an abundance consciousness? How do you do that?
I think the first step is awareness. Another word for awareness is consciousness, meaning that the more conscious I become, the more aware I become of what my belief systems are. That, for me, was the very first step in recognizing what scarcity mentality was actually doing to my life. I didn't realize it because it was unconscious, that what I was doing is it's almost like what you do is you have these strong desires and goals, and you write them down, and you do all the kind of things that a lot of the motivational books and teachers and mentors will tell you to do. But yet, why is it that so many people self-sabotage that process? Mm-hmm. They never really break through it. Well, my belief is that there is deep-seated beliefs in each one of us. And for me, personally, it was understanding that I had a consciousness mindset. And so until I started studying what was an abundance mindset, well, abundance mindset is a shift. That means that, at least from the way that I look at it, and this is more esoteric and almost abstract, is that wealth is created. Wealth is created. So in other words, all the wealth that currently exists on the planet is not all of the wealth that will ever exist. That the wealth that we have right now is an ongoing change of growth. And in fact, I remember once somebody told me that the best definition of an entrepreneur is someone who creates something from nothing. And if you think about it, that's exactly what entrepreneurs do. But the rest of the world focuses on not that stage of, what is the entrepreneur, how do they create that wealth? Well, they get an idea, they have a dream, and it starts with something inside, a thought. a vision, a goal, something that you want to achieve, and then from that is action. And that action is a natural byproduct of your thinking. And so if you're thinking that I want to go out and I want to create something, then you will automatically be prompted physically to want to take those steps. And then from those steps, something grows and it gets larger and larger. So abundance mentality essentially means, and at least from my point of view, is that wealth is created, and it's an ongoing creation process, and it's a beautiful, wonderful thing. I think where the scarcity mindset comes in is the belief that everything that was ever created and all the wealth that ever was is on the planet, and my job is to fight for it, cheat for it, compete for it, do whatever I have to do to get my piece of the pie, instead of growing the pie. And once you understand that deeply inside of you to the point where it's not just an intellectual belief, but you've aligned your heart and your mind and your soul to it, then what begins to happen is you begin to realize the true power that you have from within to create anything that you want.
Yes, and I think one of the major shifts going from a fear-based life, which is what I refer to as living below the grid, versus one that's above the grid in a state of love, joy, gratitude, peace of mind. I think what happens is you get rid of that fear in your life. There are a lot of people with and without money who live below the grid.
Absolutely.
The reality is that a lot of this is fear-based, and we've got to be able to shift it and release it. I grew up in a very fear-based mentality, scarcity mentality. My father had gone through the Great Depression, and his father died when he was really young, so it was really ingrained in us. I mean, everything, money was always an issue, and we never had enough, and it was really stressful. Some of those memories, like the ones you shared, go way back to our childhood. Those are things that by just feeling and releasing them, you can then shift into what you want your reality to be versus what it is.
And then it becomes trust. Whether you're a religious person, a spiritual person, or you're not even religious or spiritual at all, and you just believe that it's all within yourself, it doesn't matter. All that matters is that you are acting out of that faith and knowing from within yourself. And that is putting the laws of the universe in place, which is abundance creation.
So true, and that is great advice. Now I want to shift to touching base on action. I'm all about getting clear, practicing quiet time, and also identifying and completing high-value activities. I relate that to what you call action. Can you describe to me the kind of process you use? Obviously, you're an action person. I can tell you get things done. But you know how you shared you need to get your band on the road when you do your summits? You need to get them to take action. Can you share that with us? I think a lot of people think they're going to sit there and think about it or going to want it and it's just going to come to fruition. But you've got to take action, and it's got to be right action.
Oh, agreed. I mean, I think some people think you can ohm it into beingness. And you can't, because we live in a three-dimensional world. In fact, my background in education, my strength was math and physics. We live in a three-dimensional world, meaning of time and space and physical, the world of physical, even though the world of non-physical might be your thoughts and your dreams. But action is taking those thoughts and dreams and literally, not that I want to go physics on anybody here, but if you take an atom, contained within the atom are 13 trillion units of quanta. Quanta is pure light energy. That is the neutral stuff that exists in all space everywhere in the universe, which also resides within ourselves. And until we as human beings make a decision to achieve something, to want to do something, it first starts with thought. And that thought begins to literally activate all that quanta and all of those atoms and everything else, and it actually manifests into the physical realm. It moves from the unmanifest or the non-physical realm, whatever word you want to use, whether it's spiritual or religious or it's science, it's all describing the same thing, is that you're moving it from the non-physical, unmanifest world into the manifest world. And so you have to take action because it's a universal law. You can't not take action. You must take action. In fact, action is a natural, like I said earlier, byproduct of where your beliefs and your thoughts are in your mind and in your beingness what it is that you want to create. And in fact, emotion, I always say, is energy in motion. Emotion is, that's really what it stands for, is energy in motion. And the emotion that you bring to those goals, especially if those emotions are of the higher attractor patterns, which is love and passion and desire, and, you know, stuff that you actually feel from the heart and the fire in the belly and all that other kind of cool stuff, that's the juice. That's what starts taking things from the unmanifest world into the manifest world. Literally, physics will tell you that. It's not just enough to just say, well, I want this. You remember when we were kids and used to get the Sears wish book, you know, catalog at Christmas?
Yeah.
And you go, I want that, and I want that, and I want that, and, you know, dog-ear all the pages and everything else. But really, that was just a wanting. A desire is, there was that one thing that you really, really wanted, and you obsessed about it, and you told your parents about it, and you told your grandparents, and you told your friends about it, and you thought about it, and the only thing you could think about was that when you would wake up on Christmas morning, that would be the thing that would be under the tree. That's emotion, and that's bringing it into beingness. It goes from that wanting to that deep, deep desire. And unless you find that emotional reason for your goal, if it's just about making money, but money is, the old saying that money will not make you happy is true, but money was never meant to make you happy. It was meant to be a tool to serve your life based on whatever it is that you want to achieve in your life.
Well, I think a great point of that is whenever you have an external motivator such as money or ego, you're never going to stay motivated for the long term. What you're talking about when you're motivated from internal, your value system, your principles, you talk about universal laws, that's when you stay motivated for the long term. I think a lot of times people don't realize that because they think, well, gosh, I'm making money, or I like money, I want to make money. If you're only doing it for making money, it won't motivate you for the long haul.
Right. So or it'll be fear-based. It'll be because the money, if you're equating money with status, that's fear-based.
Yeah.
That's fear-based. And so therefore, you're always going to be afraid that you're going to lose it. And that's why so many people who do have, which most people say, oh my gosh, they're successful, they have the title, the status, the house, the cars, all of the trappings that go with it. And yet if you sit down and you interview some of those people, you find out they're some of the most fearful people that you would ever meet.
Yeah.
Because at some level, they feel it's fraudulent. And that fraudulent feeling is something that came within that belief system somewhere in your life, and until you get in touch with where that came from and you start changing that, you will continuously live in that. In fact, you'll have the disease of more. Yeah. Meaning it will never be enough. Right. It will never be enough, and you will never gain out of this, you know, life experience what it is that you truly wanted to gain.
Yes, that's huge. I can relate to this because I had this problem myself when I was younger. I'd accomplish a goal and I'd be on what's the next one. As long as I was on that treadmill of the next goal, the next accomplishment, I was fine. So do you have some recommendation to help a person get off that treadmill so that they're not on the I need more, I've got to do more, I've got to earn more, and get them back to those fundamentals, those emotions that you say are the right energy and motion?
I think everybody, Annette, is a little bit different. What I desired, which I never had, was I didn't have a mentor. If you really want a shortcut, that would be the shortcut. That would be the one thing that I would tell people is, look, you know, find yourself a mentor. Find yourself somebody who has what you want, not in terms of just the things, but, you know, who's living their life on purpose, has all the qualities, the elements, whatever it is that you desire at this point in your life. And it might be something real simple and real basic, but then get a mentor. And that doesn't mean that mentor has to stay your mentor for life. You can have another one and another one and another one. And if you can find a mentor, that will be extremely helpful, because then that person individually can sit with you and sort of take you down that path. And in fact, my husband is my business partner, and he does that on a regular basis where he mentors people within our business, stuff like that. And so that I think is really important now, because I did not have a mentor, okay? But what I had was, you know, this teacher who taught me that, you know, you don't have to be in the classroom to learn. You can, once you learn how to learn, you can learn anything. So what I did is I started reading books, and it wasn't necessarily books that were recommended to me. I'd have different types of books going. Sometimes it would be a self-help book. Sometimes it would be a book on money and finance. I have a pretty extensive library on monetary history that dates back over 5,000 years of human history and understanding man's relationship to money and stuff like that. So, like, for example, in America, okay, we live in debt. America's in debt. American families are in debt. In fact, our government is nothing more than a mirror image of what's going on in our households, or vice versa. It doesn't really matter. It's the one and the same thing. Until we begin to understand that we are creating that debt and that we need to strengthen ourselves financially again in order to really be a strong financial economy as we go forward, what kind of legacy are we leaving our children? Books like that, stuff that helps me to understand. That's how I reached out and found things, was through books. And then as I started connecting with people in the financial industry, I just started introducing myself to them and wanted to get to know who they were and just learn as much as I could.
You know, it sounds like you've done a lot of emotional work and a lot of soul searching to really get to where you are. If you have something that comes up, and maybe it's something that you do feel that you're afraid of or you have fear around, or let's just say it's even a crossroad. Maybe fear is not the right word, but you're somewhere where you don't feel like within you that you have the right information, which path to take, and maybe you're concerned about the impact it could have or something relating to your company. Can you walk me through that?
Sure. First of all, I think what I do, and again, this goes back to that fundamental esoteric understanding and belief system, is that I happen to also believe that everything happens for a reason and that there is a spiritual plan in place and that everything is exactly where it's meant to be. And so therefore, if I'm having a fear-based reaction to something, that's my problem. And now what I need to do is I need to look within that and find something deeper that I'm not seeing. Perfect example that I can share with you is in the spring of this year, my mother had cancer surgery, and for 2 years she was complaining about a sore throat. And she would go to the doctors, and in fact she went to different doctors, and they would do CT scans, they were doing everything, and they'd say there's nothing here, and they'd send her home. And then, she'd say, okay, well, maybe it's just in my mind. And she complained about this sore throat for 2 years. Well, sure enough, she happens to go back to a doctor, again, saying, look, I know there's something there. There's just something there. I just know it. And sure enough, they found throat cancer. It was terrible because they said you're going to have your voice box removed, and it's just a very terrible thing for anybody to go through, particularly a woman. I just remember as she was going through the surgery, the recovery time, just 2 weeks ago got her home because she was between the hospital and rehab centers since April, dealing with this artificial voice box and a stoma and all this kind of stuff. And I looked at her many, many times, and I would ask myself the question, why? Why is this happening to her? And, of course, that comes back from a fear-based thing. And I began to look at it almost at a soul level, and I realized that the struggles that she was going through was perfect for perfecting her soul. She needed to go through those things. And why do I say that? Because for 40-some years of my life when she was an alcoholic, she wasted her life in the most extravagant way that a human being could ever waste it. And because she's just almost lost her life this year, she now has a genuine desire to want to live and to want to have a relationship with her family. And that is the greatest blessing that could ever be given.
Yeah, that's great. So you really do look. It's like you go through a situation, you really look within it and really figure it out.
What's really going on that I can't see.
Oh, so right. That takes away the fear. But I also think it really gets us on course. So when you get off track, for instance, you have your business plan and you get off track, what brings you back on course?
One thing that helps me a lot, Annette, is, in fact, I'm sitting in my office right now and I'm looking out the window, and it's a beautiful summer day, and I have this whiteboard in the corner. And at the top of the whiteboard it says an initiative, and I have my list. And it's in front of me all the time, okay? So that keeps me from all of the lots of distractions that happen in the course of the day that can take you off tangent. So constantly it's like having all of your goals or your initiatives and the things you're supposed to be focused on in front of you at all times. The other thing that I have right next to my phone here, besides my little card file and everything else, is I have sticky notes. One of the sticky notes that I have here is from, I don't know if you remember Marva Holland. She was a famous educator in the 1960s, and it's entitled Responsibility, and it says here, determination and perseverance move the world. Thinking that others will do it for you is a sure way to fail. Okay, so I have that in front of me at all times to make sure that if it is to be, it's up to me. I can't throw the ball in somebody else's court at all times thinking that they're going to do it. I can delegate things, but I'm still ultimately responsible for the outcome. And then the other thing that keeps me on track from a spiritual standpoint, in the bigger global perspective of what I feel like my little part of contribution is into the world and where it's going right now, is I have just a little phrase here that says, I'm attracting the world's leading edge thinkers who are laying the foundation for the new economy, for the new world, and are in alignment with my core values and beliefs. And so every conversation that I have every single day, and I look over at that little saying right there, I ask myself the question internally, it's my course corrector, am I speaking to someone or a group of someones who can lead me to the someones who are those leading edge thinkers who want to go out and change the world? Because they're out there, I just haven't found all of them yet, and I want to network with them.
So on a daily basis, how do you support your team? You mentioned that your husband mentors some of the people that are in your organization. You obviously have a lot of road shows where you speak. I believe it's to advisors and clients. Is that correct?
I set up the financial systems. So, for example, if there was a brand new branch office that just opens up in, let's say, Wyoming, as an example, because that's a new office area that we're working in right now, we open up that office is going to need systems structured to train and develop advisors. I set up the systems to get those people trained. That's my main job, to go out and to, from a marketing perspective, because my fingers are on the pulse of the consumer at all times, I have my own client base, is to find programs that would fit for what our reps and our clients need out there. And then it's my job to bring those relationships together and let due diligence people take a look at it and stuff like that, and then to develop those programs.
Now you have a philosophy where you feel that there should be no family left behind. Even the smaller investor should be able to have the ability of what the larger investor has. Can you expand on that a little bit?
As long as you have a dream and you have a belief, you have to be one half of the equation, we can be the other half of the equation to help you to get there. And that we've developed programs and we've put in product providers that will help those families to establish accounts for $50 a month, and we'll actually have people who sit down and do the paperwork and do that. So it's all about serving families.
Oh, that's great. I'm sure a large part of that also comes from the experience. When you were 4 and having just what you'd gone through, where you'd seen what happened to your mom and there wasn't a plan in place, I think those things are so important. Just taking the time to really get clear on them. I think they help people who would not be able to get help from an advisor, and I think it's huge.
And I think what we've been able to do is, how do I say this without sounding negative, but I think one of the reasons why the industry is leaving so many families behind that are the underserved market is because their business models are broken. And what I mean by that is that, at least my experience has been with other financial advisors, even within our company or other companies, is that it's a function of how many clients can you take care of. What happens economically is if you say, okay, I can handle a client base of 200 clients, but no more than that, because I just physically, it's not humanly possible for me to take care of that. Now, if you want to start increasing your margins, what do? You start peeling away those smaller clients. And so as the industry is growing, it is actually the average account size is increasing, and more people are being left behind. What we did is we said the only way the underserved market will ever get served is if we have a business model structured where you build an army. We need to penetrate the offices everywhere, not just in the big cities, but in the rural areas, wherever people are that need that help, so that we have that high touch that's going on there. It's for the same reason that a lot of us go and buy our prescription drugs at Walgreens because it happens to be the corner store and we can get to it pretty quickly. If we can build outlets, which are branch offices, and whether those branch offices are a couple of people or like in my office here are a couple hundred people, doesn't really matter. It's how many families are you serving, and is the business model designed to reach those? Because if the business model isn't designed to reach it, then the business model is broken, and it goes back to the U.S. government. You've got good people working in a fundamentally broken system that isn't going to serve the people that you're trying to serve.
So how do you provide service? Clearly, as an advisor, and the bigger clients you get, the less you can serve the smaller ones. So what do you guys do for your business model that allows you to serve people who are, say, putting $50 or $100 away?
We recruit and develop greenies and give them a part-time opportunity.
Okay.
And so we're one of the only firms in the country today that I know of that will go out and hire the school teacher who doesn't have a financial background and actually teach him or her how to get in this business and make a living. And then do it part-time perhaps, maybe in the summers while you have the summers off so that you can supplement your income and not have them have the pressure of having to make a living on $50 a month deals.
That is so needed.
And we're criticized for that.
Well, it's one thing if you're not trained. I mean, clearly, you've got to be training them, but the issue is who wants to serve them. Most financial advisors won't deal with them. And almost everyone comes from a different industry. There are very few people who get into this industry right out of college. I mean, other than myself, I know very few. The reality is that most people come from different walks of life. And being able to start this business and have clients and have support getting off the ground, I think is absolutely critical. People can complain, but unless they're out there helping them, they're out there doing it, somebody else needs to. I mean, one of the most fascinating statistics I have ever seen is that 70%, like 68% of people over the age of 65 living in poverty are women. If they had help from an advisor, they wouldn't be broke. Now, many of them were okay when they were working or they were married. But then when they're not, it can be devastating. So I think this is awesome that you're doing that.
That's why I set up the financial training systems. It's like, I think Robert Kiyosaki probably said it the best. What's the difference between the self-employed person and the business owner? One simple test. Ask yourself the question, if I remove myself out of that business for a period of 1 year and come back, do I still have a business? If the answer is no, you bought a job.
Right.
It's not a business. And unless you have a business system that systematizes it, you're right, financial advisors not only come from different backgrounds, but they all have sort of their own quirky ways of doing things, and they can't usually duplicate themselves. Everything that I do is set up to develop the financial training systems that are duplicatable. So no matter where we open an office, we'll say, if I parachuted myself into Wyoming and I wanted to open an office, could I do it? Absolutely, because everything's systematized.
That's awesome. And looking back over your life, is there anything you would have done differently?
That is an awesome question. I guess I really don't have any regrets, and even though I've had some very difficult times in my life, losing my father, my mother going into alcoholism, going through the whole welfare thing, the scarcity mentality. I got married at a young age. I lost my first husband to cancer. My mother going through what she's just recently gone through. I mean, when I look at all of the really difficult trials and tribulations, it has brought me to where I am today. So had I not had those situations, I don't think I would have the courage to do what I do today.
Well, I clearly think that's the right perspective. I think one of the things is that whatever course you were on, where you were willing to go and do the work to get from where you are to where you want to be, it's huge. Most people that are successful are willing to do the work and others aren't. And I think it's amazing when we can also impact people's life in the process. That's just awesome to see. I know that a lot of times behind the scenes, you don't know what's going on, but since I do know Marty pretty well, you guys are affecting so many lives and it's such an inspiration. I had a mentor, and one of the things she said to me is, you've got to focus on doing what motivates and inspires you. And I thought, that's great advice for anyone. And she said, when you feel it's motivating and inspiring, you know you're on the right course To me, what you're doing is motivating and inspiring, and I just want to congratulate you. It's so awesome.
Well, it's what brings meaning to what we do.
Yeah.
And then everything else sort of becomes this byproduct. Every single one of us, no matter who we are, what we do, how we think, what we believe, is contributing into that whole unified picture that I see. And it matters.
Mm-hmm.
It matters. If you want to be a janitor, be a great one. If it brings meaning to your life because you're doing something that you think is contributing, then do it with passion. But everything is being contributed. It matters. Where people begin to lose their vision is when they think that what they're doing, number one, doesn't matter, that even if they tried, it isn't going to matter anyway because the problem is so big. And then they disconnect from that universal source of energy, and once you're disconnected from that, that's when all sorts of other things can happen in your life. You can get sick, you can get depressed, there's no meaning, there's no juice, there's no reason for you to want to be here other than to just take up space and breathe. You got to have a meaning. I think it's all about looking within yourself, not what the neighbor thinks you should be doing or your parents think you should be doing or your spouse or your kids or, or what you even think you should be doing. It's like, what's your desire? Mm-hmm. What is the grandest wish that you've ever had for your life?
Well, I think, too, understanding that we're all connected. A lot of people don't realize this. Until we realize that we are all at some level connected and that there's a purpose, a bigger purpose, I think that's part of it. Once you start getting that, you enter into a different chapter of your life. I look at some people, they see a problem in front of them, or they're overwhelmed, but they get into a state of inertia, and they really don't know what to do or how to do it. So it's often common that, people go into the victimhood, but instead you went and you took specific action and said, okay, I don't know what I'm supposed to do. I don't know how I can impact, but I'm sure if I start impacting one step at a time, one day at a time, and look at where you are. It's amazing.
In this little corner of the world.
And you've taken it literally from nothing to this huge impact. And I think anyone listening to this needs to understand that's what you're capable of doing when you have a big picture and you start taking that correct action and having meaning and purpose. It's so powerful. It's people like you that are making a difference and going to make this world a better place. As compared to when you hear a person say, there's nothing I can do, it's a problem. It's just unbelievable what you've done. You start out with this little step and look at where you are now. It's just amazing.
Now imagine where we'll be in 10 years.
No kidding. It's like we have to keep you healthy and keep you going, right?
I also feel like kind of goes back to my little saying in my desk here, I'm attracting the world's leading edge thinkers who are laying the foundation for the new economy and new world and are in alignment with my core values and beliefs. I don't believe I'm the only one. I believe there's a bunch of us out there. And won't it be cool when we finally link up and find each other? And second of all, which I think is even more powerful, is we're going to wake up our brothers and sisters who right now are sleeping unconsciously because they're not aware of the power that they have within themselves. Yeah. So once they discover that, it's like, oh my gosh, we're unstoppable.
Now, you guys own a home in another country. Is this true?
Yes. We own a home in the British Virgin Islands. It's on an island called Tortola, which is the main island of all the BVI islands. If you've ever been to the U.S. Virgin Islands, where St. Thomas and St. John is, Tortola, actually what we do is we'll fly into St. Thomas and then take the ferry over to the west end of Tortola, and we just ferry right past St. John. We've been building this house for over 5 years, and we're planning on living there about a month a quarter. Maybe as little as 2 weeks a quarter initially. We want to use it for our business. We want to share it with our business associates and, of course, our family. We're at the top of Long Bay, and Long Bay is probably one of the best well-known beaches in the BVI, and we're right at that very tippy-top mountaintop. In fact, my house looks right over directly to Yosemite on one side, and then on the back side is St. John.
Wow, I bet it's beautiful.
That's a part of attracting the world's leading edge thinkers. Oh.
Absolutely. This is great. I love St. John. It's so beautiful down there. That is so exciting. I've never been to Tortolo, but I bet it's amazing.
The BVI is the other reason that I love it down there. And I'm meeting so many wonderful people from all over the world. And most of the people who are there that come in from other countries actually come more from Europe than they do the United States.
Yeah.
And so I'm getting a chance to really meet a very diverse group of people that are very also global-minded as I am. It's real interesting to be able to have the perspective of the United States from other people who don't actually live there, because most of us here in the United States think the world revolves around us, and it doesn't, but we think it does. And so it's real interesting to get their perspective of the American people and our government, our economy, all that kind of stuff, because of course they don't have as much emotionally invested into it as we do. So it's a wonderful place to go and to really sort of disconnect, if you will, and then reconnect back up globally.
Well, we've traveled a lot throughout the world, and one of the things that does concern me is some of the countries that really have a dislike for the U.S. I think, we've got to change. We've got to improve on that.
Yeah, and there's a lot of good reasons and legitimate reasons for that. I think part of it is that at one time, as the United States was a superpower, we took that responsibility to heart, and we governed ourselves understanding we carried that responsibility to the rest of the world. In the last several years, that has shifted to us acting like we're the only player at the table and no one else matters, or if they are there, they're subordinated to us.
Yeah.
And that's the feeling they have, and people get turned off by that. Can't muscle our way through everything. There's too much male energy on the planet, Annette. That's the other part of my philosophy, is the feminine principle is going to save this planet, especially if you take women and you put them into positions of power. And I don't mean just the traditional power in the corporate boardroom. In positions where we can affect change. And until you get women involved, we can affect a lot of change in our households. Lord knows we've done it pretty well. But now when we start stepping out and taking that role in the global perspective of things is when we're going to go about changing the systems that are way, way, way too much male energy. And the men need us. They need that, just like they need us in the households, they need that balance.
I think somewhat that's shifting. I look at even my boys where, it used to be very, very, everything was masculine, everything's testosterone based. And I've really seen a shift in even how they're raised and how they're much more comfortable talking about emotions and things like that. They've got a much better balance of their energy.
It's all about the yin and yang, the balance of energy. If men are disallowing their feminine energy side, then they're wounded, which means that they will go through life seeking it someplace else, which is going to be on the outside. So they're going to seek it through relationships. And there isn't another woman on the planet that will ever be able to support a man who feels that void within himself. He's got to find it. Just like we, as a lot of women, have to bring the male energy balance into our lives. Otherwise, if we don't have it, we'll forever be looking for it in the external world. And women we have this amazing capacity to be able to speak our minds and our hearts and do the Oprah thing. And yet men don't do that. They clam up. They think that the most important thing that they have to do is to just put up and do their work and to go about their warlike energies, which whether that's on the battlefield or in the boardroom, and worrying about how they're going to provide for their families. Men carry a huge, huge burden, and they need to be healed too on the inside, and that's about allowing that feminine energy within themselves, not given to them from a partner or from a mother or from a sister or from, whatever other feminine relationship it is. It's got to be from within themselves, and when they get strong, oh my gosh, that's when the world will start to heal too.
A question just came up to me. You obviously are an expert in the market, and when you have people who are really afraid of what's happening out there in the market, what process do you use to walk them through getting over fear? I think some people are afraid whenever they hear anything, and we're looking at, we've had some major challenges in the economy, drops, issues in the recession, the pandemic. What I'd love to do is kind of get your perspective on that.
How do I reconcile that into the global perspective things, and how do I communicate that on a practical level, say, to a client?
Yes, like say for example, a client that's nervous about what's happening. What do you say to help them, get them back on course? What do you do to get them out of that fear state?
Well, I mean, I think the first thing you got to do is acknowledge that, and acknowledge the fact that there are some real things that are happening out there. I mean, the stuff that I'm talking about, and as the world moves into sort of this unified global economy and stuff like that, globalization, whatever you want to call it, is very fearful for a lot of people. Particularly in the United States. It's funny, I can go into Canada and do an economic summit and talk about globalization in the sense of where most of the real growth in the world is happening right now. And as these economies are moving into what you and I take for granted, or a Canadian citizen or any developed market in the world takes for granted, which is simple things like electricity, a washing machine, the ability to cook on a stove, to be able to have transportation, all those types of things. And then the other thing that I'm beginning to talk to people a lot about is the fact that you got to understand what real wealth creation and preservation is really all about. And it's not about having everything that you've got in a U.S. denominated dollar or a U.S. denominated asset. You've got to get globally diversified. I mean, one of the reasons why I went to the BVI, besides the fact that I absolutely love it down there, and my husband and I were going down there on a regular basis every year and spending a bunch of money, is I started getting introduced to Swiss bankers and people who were managing hedge funds, and I'm saying we're looking at much more on a global scale, and I started realizing, oh my gosh, there's a whole lot more out there to be diversified into than just the good old U.S. economy. And when the U.S. economy is strong, that's great. But, you know, if you go over the last 50 years, the U.S. economy and the United States has been a superpower and growing. But we're now a superpower a little bit in decline. We've taken on more debt, okay, than we could ever possibly pay back in our lifetime, our children's or our grandchildren's lifetime, unless we inflate it away. And if we're going to do that, we're going to do damage to the U.S. dollar. And if we're going to do damage to the U.S. dollar, whether we do it consciously or unconsciously, if you want wealth preservation, you better find ways to make money and profit when the U.S. dollar declines. And so you've got to understand that some of the more classic strategies of asset allocation are not modern portfolio theory stuff. You've got to go back before modern portfolio theory, and you got to go back and understand what really preserves what real wealth is, what the really truly wealthy people on the planet are doing, the super smart money and the smart money, not just the person who just says, well, look, here's Harry Markowitz and here's asset allocation. That's all looking in the rearview mirror, and that's all good and fine when the U.S. economy was strong and growing and productive. But the rules are changing, and they're changing very, very rapidly, and one has to understand what it really takes to create wealth, number one, and then number two is to preserve that wealth, and that's all about preserving your purchasing power. Yeah. And if the dollar is being debased at the level that it is right now, and it is being debased, then you got to understand ways to preserve that. And so that kind of goes back to answering the question on, there's a good reason why a lot of people feel fear. Right. Because I think what they do, Annette, is they turn on television, internet, read stuff, and you're right. It's all these economists got their same degrees out of the same universities, and yet there isn't a single university out there teaching monetary history. What they're teaching is modern economics based on the systems that we have now, and those systems are an experiment. It's not something that has survived over 5,000 years of human history. And so when you start going back and you start looking at really true economics, it's easy for me to turn on the television and go, oh, man, I can't believe we have people saying this stuff. But they're parroting what they learned in school. They're not thinking outside the box. They don't really understand true economics. And so once you begin to understand that, it's real easy to see through it and call it for what it is.
Do you have some specific books that you recommend?
The stuff that I was reading, I remember when I first started learning about economics and monetary history and all that kind of stuff was in the 1980s. And somebody gave me a book about the Russian Revolution, and that doesn't seem like it sounds important, but when I began to understand what happened in that country during the Russian Revolution and how the whole communist thing happened, how Hitler came into power. Hitler came into power because he was a man who was a savior. He was going to save the German economy from the terrible debt that they were in because they had lost Poland in World War I and they owed more money than what they could possibly pay off. And Hitler said, what I have is the solution. And so they put the man in power, and the man turned it out to be who he was, hyperinflated the economy. The last time that it was illegal for you to be able to move money out of one country to another was Nazi Germany. And so right now, what I'm beginning to see in the U.S. horizon is the fact that the U.S. politicians don't want to see people taking their money and investing it other than in the U.S. economy. They even begin to see that as a threat because they know.
Right.
They know. And it's not just the Republicans and it's not just the Democrats. It's both. It's both parties. Because they're stuck in a system, too, that is not going to be able to fix itself unless we dig ourselves out of debt.
So true.
What are some of the opportunities you see right now?
Ooh, I see so many great opportunities out there. It's not in the traditional places where we've looked before, and that's one of the reasons why there is great opportunity to make money there, because it's not where everybody else is looking. First of all, there's this belief, not so much around the world, but particularly in the U.S., is that the international markets carry the most amount of risk, and that is no longer true. So if the U.S. economy only represents 22% of global GDP, we got to start looking outside the United States. And there's very good companies, and those companies are listed in the U.S. stock exchanges, and there's a lot of different ways in place that you can have a globally diversified portfolio. That can include equities, it can include bonds. What we like to do now with, the exchange-traded funds out there is, now if you really understand how to build those strategies, it's wide open. Because you can get currency plays in there, you can get inverse plays, you can get leverage plays, you can get commodity plays, you can get almost everything you want to continue to stay globally diversified. It's just not being afraid to look at asset classes and sectors that previously we never had to look at before.
One of the things that you hit on is when we do things just because we're brainwashed to do them, we do them out of fear. And what do you recommend for people that say, are afraid of maybe investing outside the United States?
Well, and for America right now, it's more than that. It's an arrogance factor.
Yeah.
The arrogance is that, the world revolves around this U.S.-centric economy, and that's not true anymore. We're going to have to come to grips with that. When I go to Canada and talk about these issues, they love it. I talk about these issues in the U.S., and I feel a little bit of that fear factor in the wall coming up, and I feel a little bit of that arrogance, which is, we are America, and and I'm proud to be an American. I am, but at the same time, I'm a global citizen, okay, and I'm a global investor. And as a result of that, I'm a global thinker, and I want to bring about change globally. I don't go into the fear side of it. I look at the opportunity side of it. In the future is understanding what those trends are and positioning themselves before it becomes obvious to everybody else.
Mm-hmm.
Well, if you study the economy over years, there's always opportunities in specific markets. Sometimes it's the U.S., sometimes other countries. But the key is identifying where the money is going and where those opportunities are.
In the 1980s, it was Japan. Yeah, you're right. It's looking at where the mega trends are going and then positioning yourself there. And then having the ability to hook up with money managers who understand that and have access to that research.
Okay, if you're sitting with somebody and mentoring them, they're going to take over your position. What are 3 recommendations you would give them?
I'm already doing that.
Oh, okay.
I systematize everything. I approach everything with what I define as a large numbers mentality. In other words, if it can't be simplified and duplicatable, it's not worth doing. Okay, that's number 1. The second is I am actively mentoring people right now. So I'm mentoring those people to be able to achieve not only what I have, but hopefully greater because, again, we're not separate, right? It's all part of the whole.
Yeah.
And so I don't have a fear that someone else will become more successful than me. I would welcome it. And that's why I'm not afraid to share a lot of the things that we have learned and we have done in our company, where other companies would say, well, that's sort of proprietary and that's a big secret. And I don't fear that because I recognize that, like in the world of science and physics, is one discovery is made and the next discovery is built off of the shoulders of the people who discovered that, and saying it's all sequential and it's all part of growth and evolution, and that's wonderful. those are the two top things, is I'm directly mentoring people, and the other is I'm setting up those systems to make sure that those systems run the business and it's not driven by the personality of the individual. That's the difference between the practice versus the enterprise. Practice is personality driven, the enterprise is systems driven.
I also think the other thing is to add is that even if you give those ideas out there, people need to implement them. What I'm wondering is, most people won't. I laugh because when I first started out in the financial services business, I was one of the top agents in Arizona, and they'd have me do these marketing talks, and I'd go in there, people would say, oh, that's just such great advice. I'd come back a year later and no one would have implemented them. It was fascinating how few people take action. The problem is most people want to be where someone else is, but they don't want to do the work.
And that's where the mentoring comes in, Annette. The people that I work with directly are the people who stepped out of the crowd and say, the student is ready, the teacher is appearing, will you teach me? And those are the people that I take under my wing.
Wow, that would be amazing.
And the times that we have together, and then we get together in groups, and then it's like, talk about mind-blowing, it's unbelievable.
And are most of those people representatives of your advisory firm?
Yes.
That's great, absolutely great. All right, I have one more question. As far as recommendations for a person getting to the next level, do you have any insights? I mean, they're at point A, they want to get to point B. You've given some great tips, but do you have anything else to help them with their goals, their vision, their action?
Well, to get from point A to point B, know what point B is. Decide. Be specific about it. And then play with it. Dream about it. Imagine, how many people have you ever heard the story that they were not so good in school because they spent all their time daydreaming and looking out the window? And those are the people that are the Bill Gates of the world. Yeah. That was the key. Dreaming about it and playing with it and visualizing it. And we have, one of the things that we do is when somebody reaches $100,000 a year, we give them a ring, okay, and that ring symbolizes that you're a $100,000 a year earner. And then the stone within that ring changes if you get to 250, and then the color changes to $500,000, and then $1 million, and then we have one for $2 million and $3 million and stuff. So one of the visualization techniques that we teach is to visualize that ring on your finger before it's there and what color stone is in it.
That's great.
And it's stuff like that, but that's knowing what B is. If you don't even know what B is, then how can you get from point A to point B? And so that's a business plan, and that business plan is comprised of not just your business life, but your personal life, your physical life, your financial life, your spiritual life, all aspects of that, and then getting very, very, very clear about what it is that you want to achieve. Because once you get clear, the physical action, remember I said earlier in the interview, will automatically happen. Mm-hmm. When you're not focused, when you don't know what it is, you get distracted and busy. I call it active laziness. You're just going around and around and around and around, but you're not hitting any goals because you don't even know what they are.
I think one thing that's so important about goals, even when obstacles come in our way, if we're clear on our goals, we can move around the obstacle. They don't distract us. The problem is when we're not clear on where we're going, a pebble can get in our way and we're off track. Whereas when we have our goals set, a boulder can't deter us. Now, are you willing to share any examples of what you're doing as far as initiatives?
Right now I have at the top of the list is national expansion, meaning U.S., and then second is Canadian expansion. What that means is that we need to get offices in, we have a high concentration of people in a handful of states. We need to have a national expansion plan other than just the typical business model that we have right now. We have to think outside the box on how to do that. To the bottom of the list, I see things like right now we're working on our own branded 401k program. We're working on an online training program where our reps, once they're newly licensed, all their training can actually be online. That's part of the systems stuff that we talk about. And we've just finished phase 1 of that. It's not online yet. It's actually in a disc format. We just mailed it out, but we have the techies right now getting it online. So it's those types of things.
What about personal? Do you have some personal initiatives?
Oh, yeah. My personal initiative is related to the house down in the BVI. It's kind of like a little family compound is what I call it. The house is actually not one house. The main house sits at the top of the mountain. and there's an 82-foot infinity pool that is cantilevered out out of the mountain by 14 feet. And when you walk down the steps, okay, there are 3 other buildings, and those 3 buildings are what are called bedroom pods. And so if you've ever been to the Caribbean, it's not unusual for you to have separate parts of your house literally physically separate from each other, where you walk outside from your bedroom to go to the main house and stuff like that. That's real common. And there's 5 bedrooms, all suites on their own with their own bathrooms and all that kind of stuff. And there's 2 things that I want to do. One is I want to get my family down there, and we have some family issues that we need to heal. And to me, that's the most beautiful place to do it in, where we can all sort of hole up for a while and heal some of those issues. And also I want to develop closer relationships with my grandkids. I have 5 grandkids, and I want to spend some high-quality time with them and, you know, teach them how to do some really cool stuff and do it in one of the most beautiful places on the planet. We also are building a planetarium there, which is an observatory, and we've got the 14-foot dome. It's up there, and the telescope is now being actually put in there. I want to teach them, so I have some personal goals that way. And then on the business side is also related to the house. Part of being visionary, I think, is to get people out of their environment and into another environment for a period of time where we can all be together, we can brainstorm some ideas and really think outside the box. So those are my 2 personal goals for this next year, is to really utilize that space. It's so beautiful. You're there where it's water and it's sky and it's earth, and it's beautiful. It's just one of the most beautiful places on the planet, and I think it's a great place to unplug from what I call the matrix and get family and friends and business associates and other leading business people in the world together, and just let's create a new world. Let's make the world a better place. And if we can heal our families and our family situations, we can heal ourselves. We can build new systems as we go forward.
Yes, and heal the world. Amen. That's great. This is great. Is there anything else?
Well, what I'm really loving is the work that you're doing, Annette. I would like to have you as part of that networking group.
Can we have our next meeting down at your Caribbean home?
Sure, why not? You know, before we started the interview, I was so curious to see what your work is and how you're doing it and how you're getting that information out, or how you're attracting other people and stuff like that, because I think that what you're doing is you are putting out really wonderful information that's really directed a lot to the financial advisors. And I really believe that there are a lot of really great financial advisors out there that are also stuck in systems that are not serving them, that they would like to be able to, I don't want to say break out of, but just network with other great thinkers that are other financial advisors. Even if we're in competitive firms, it doesn't matter. It's all about affecting that change from the inside out.
Absolutely. I think it's a matter of helping people get to their next level. When you find what you're really passionate about, sometimes, you know, you get it early, other times it takes you time to find it, but it changes your life. And, you know, some people might say, gosh, you know, I'm not happy where I am, but if you can focus, keep moving forward, ultimately you find that. When you make a little difference in somebody's life, it expands and it grows, and all of a sudden you're thinking, okay, I'm making a difference in somebody's life, and before you know it, you're on course. It's so rewarding.
Well, and when you get to that moment where you think, oh my gosh, my life could end at this moment, and I'm having that review of what did I really contribute, you can then leave knowing that you contributed. There's no regrets. You made the contribution. You did the best that you could, but you did it consciously, meaning you were aware that that was what you wanted to do, not that you walked through your whole life sleepwalking thinking that all these other trappings and everything else around me is what made me successful, when you finally realize, and perhaps even the facing death, is that stuff is nothing. Yeah. That's nothing. What really is important is who we became, who we affected, and how we use the gifts that we were given. And I mean, that might sound kind of corny for some people, but that's what brings the meaning to your life. And I do believe that every relationship, everything is a sacred contract. And even what might appear to be an enemy can become your greatest teacher.
Oh, I hate to say we're out of time. This has been so insightful, Dina. Thank you so much. I really value your insight and the lessons you've shared.
Well, thank you, Annette.
So thank you so much for joining us. This was such an amazing interview with Dina. So many nuggets in there. I really encourage you to go back, watch it, take notes, and most importantly, apply it. This is Annette Bau, host of the Millionaire Insider. All international copyrights are reserved. Thank you so much for joining us today. You can go to millionaireseries.com/104 for all the show notes, or millionaireseries.com/mi for all of the episodes. Please hit subscribe so you get updates on new episodes. And if you want a Millionaire Insider mug, please engage. People who engage, show me how you're applying this material, are ones that get it. So thank you so much for attending. This is Annette Bau, host of the Millionaire Insider. Bye now.